call this meeting to order. We'll have a roll call, please.
Denham. Here. Skames.
Somewhere.
Cooper.
He's in a show.
Milton.
Here.
Fenton.
Here.
Whitus.
Here.
See, Your Honor, you have a quorum for the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you.
Call the Finance Committee. Fenton.
Here.
Whitus.
Still here.
Milton.
Here.
Dobbins.
Here.
Yancey.
Here.
Denham. Here. Romine.
Here.
Buckley.
Here.
Your Honor, you have a quorum for the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the Finance Committee minutes for August 26, 21, regular meeting, September 17th, 21, regular meeting, and September 30, 21, joint
I'll
meeting.
make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is the Branson Convention Center second and third quarter 21 review, presented by Mr. Sam.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the time. Wanted to give you a quick update, year-to-date, quarters 1 through 3, and some of this will be updated quarters 2 and 3. And let's see here. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about highlights. I'm going to give you some lowlights. We all have lowlights. And then financials, and then a capital request. So here's some really good highlights of second and third quarter. We just had completed Women of Joy, which was 3,100 attendees over 3 days with Phil Waltrip Ministries. They come twice a year, and this was a very, very successful one. Given the environment of attendance and this type of thing that has been reduced over the last 18 months due to COVID, they experienced what they thought was a record attendance for their time. Once again, Arkansas Assemblies of God came back for 3 days, 600 people. We do very well with cheer and dance. All-out championships exceeded their numbers from the previous 2 years put together, so that is outstanding. Arkansas nurse anesthetists, they did an incredible, incredible job. This was...
Sam,
Yes.
you say they had a tournament. What was their tournament that he could put the patient
The tournament for the
asleep
cheer and dance...
fastest?
I'm sorry?
Was it to determine who could put the patient out the fastest?
Well, the tournament was for the cheer and dance. The anesthetist did not have a tournament on putting people under.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
Now
next
we got
time,
that
I'm not
straight.
sure, but, you know, hey, anything's possible. So this actually went above to the cheer and dance, as you can see. The Missouri State Troopers Convention. This was very successful. This was 700 attendees over 4 days. They had a wonderful time, and I believe they have been in Branson a few times off and on in a rotation. The Chamber of Commerce Convention for the state was in town. That went very well, very successful. And the Cornhole Organization. We are looking to host the majors this coming year, and this was what they call a Midwest major, and they did very well. That was about 4,000 people over the weekend. They also, I guess my NDA has run out because they're about to put it out there. They filmed a segment for a reality show that you'll be seeing on a major network right here in Branson. Attended as a team, and I wanted to show you this picture here. This is the Cornhole Association, I'm sorry, the Cornhole Organization picture that you see at the bottom right here. These are our chamber partners. You can see the Landing representation with Nikki there, as well as the Hilton with Harold. And you see Tara as well, and a lot of others, including Joanna Curtis. It takes a team to put on large events. And I just want to let you know that while we had 167 event days in quarters 2 through 3, these are not done in a bubble or a vacuum. These are done as a team. It takes the chamber input. It takes the Hilton to work together with us as well. Given that, we just went to 2 trade shows. One would be Teams and one is Connect. Connect was in Tampa, which is called Connect Marketplace. And that's where all the meeting planners go and shop destinations. Well, we went as an entire team. There was about 15 people from Branson that went, including the Landing, including the Hilton, the Branson Convention Center, the Chamber, the CVB. We all went as a team and served moonshine ice cream. And let me tell you, it was a hit. They had 30,000 attendees at this major convention in Tampa. And I'm going to tell you, it feels like, because I scooped ice cream for 3 hours straight one time without a, this is incredible. It seems like we had 20,000 people get ice cream from Branson. So we had at least 16 RFPs out of this. Now, that's where the rubber meets the road. We can do this and we can show an image, but what type of ROI we're going to get? So where the rubber meets the road is 16 RFPs, which is incredible.
Sam, would you explain 16 RFPs and what that means?
Request for proposal is when a meeting planner says, I want to see what you got in Branson. Why don't you give me a proposal on what it will cost for me to host your event, given these parameters? And these parameters are, I need X amount of space, I need X amount of food, I need X amount of hotel rooms, I need X amount of transportation. And that's where the team comes in, where the Tourism Bureau, the Chamber, the Hilton, and Branson Convention Center get together and answer these RFPs because they have different segments that need to be answered. And that's where success happens. You're on the same page with one proposal, not 3 different proposals.
Got you, buddy.
Yes.
Thank you.
So those are some of the highlights. Here's some of the lowlights.
Ooh.
We had quarters 1 through 3. Now remember, we book in advance probably 18 months to a year out. So what this means, this was last year's bookings that came through but canceled due to the Delta variant. We had 111 event days cancel up year to date through quarter 3. That's huge. 14,000 attendees did not come to Branson because of the Delta variant. The estimated revenue is over $1 million lost. That's a low light in my book. But I have some highlights to show you. Even with, and I'm going to go back a little bit, even with losing 111 event days year to date, we are only 13 event days off budget. That's incredible. If we would not have had this variant, we would have blown it out of the water. It would have been off the chart. Here's a brief summary of year-to-date, and I'll explain what governmental accounting is versus performance accounting. But here's where we are. Year-to-date, our gross income is down, as you can see. The first column is the 21 actuals year-to-date, 2.1 million and some change, versus budgeted what we thought would be 2.4 million and some change. Now, that is a gap, but it's not a significant gap when you've lost over $1 million in revenue. The indirect expenses, you can see that the expenses are lower than what was budgeted. Of course, we all have to do that and keep pace with revenue reductions. And the net operating loss after you subtract your income from your expenses or vice versa is $336,000 and some change versus what we thought we would be at $57,000 and some change. Remember, with $1 million revenue loss still, that's the difference. Now, whenever I say governmental accounting versus performance accounting, the marketing fund comes into play. We have creatively utilized the marketing fund to help incentivize business as we have talked about in the past. And that has been very, very successful. In governmental accounting, that marketing fund expenditure is counted in expense and it's counted in revenue for a net effect of 0. So if 100,000 is reimbursed, it is in the expense side, but it's expense in the revenue, it is a net effect, bottom line 0. That doesn't really tell you what the performance is based upon utilization of that fund, because you have a net effect of 0, when in essence you have solidified a booking, which generates revenue. So in the performance accounting side, I have taken that into consideration and just taken it out of the expense side. So if we were to look at that and say, well, our marketing fund utilization to incentivize events to book at the convention center, not as an expense. Now, some are, like going to a trade show, that's a hard cost. There's flights, there's hotels, that's not accounted in here. This is nothing more than an incentivized booking for rental, which would be profit. If this type of performance was looked at, we would actually have made $32,000 here. Now, all that is taking the incentive fund portion of the marketing fund and taking it out of the expense. You can see the revenue is the same. So, there's two ways of looking at it. Now, we're in governmental accounting because this is your budget. And so, we look at that first side. But if you were to say, well, Sam, how are you guys performing? I would look at the second one. Any questions on that so far?
Before you move on, the marketing fund you're referring to, I believe, is the $500,000 that comes out of the
Yes, sir.
city fund. Prior to your arrival, my recall says that $500,000 was not being utilized, or a very small amount of that was being utilized for marketing. So in effect, and I think this is what you're referring to, in effect, it did not show up as an expense for $500,000. You are utilizing the $500,000, is that correct?
I'm utilizing the $500,000 in a revenue situation as well, because we're incentivizing events to book into the center.
Yes.
Unlike in the past where we were advertising only,
Yeah.
which is a hard cost expense. And when you advertise only as a hard cost expense, there is a point of diminishing returns.
Yes.
Here, we have creatively utilized this fund.
Yeah.
Where the rubber meets the road is at the booking. So
right.
that's where the incentive is. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to compliment you on that.
Thank you so much. All right. Once again, we talked about expenses, but, in a down year, you want to make sure that your expenses are correlating in a reduction to your revenue. We have done that in a large way with net salaries and benefits. We're doing more with less. Now, not to say that I won't ask in the future to please, let's hire some more people if we can find them, but I can tell you that everyone's doing triple duty as a team over at the convention center. And I have to applaud them, from the sales department going to plate up 1,000 plates as of this past week, to even myself carving ham for the Missouri Baptist Convention. Really get to talk to everybody, Sam and the ham thing, I don't know.
Sam, I am.
I think they put me on that ham for a reason, I don't know. But I'm gonna tell you, it's almost refreshing to see people step up. Our full-timers are stepping up and to do triple time, and it's just really refreshing to see a good teamwork there. However, financially, we've saved $600,000 and some change by really looking at our org chart and saying, okay, let's put different people in different seats on the bus and make sure that they thrive in those seats. And that's how we go from good to great, which I think that's where we are on track to be. Utilities. I had mentioned that we're only 13 event days off of our budget submitted, but we're almost $100,000 in utilities of reduction. So we're not that far off in the amount of events that require utilities. However, we're very far off in our utility usage, which means we're turning the lights off. We're monitoring 24/7 HVAC systems, huge deal. Just for the car show, Branson Classic Car Auction, which was a huge success. Jim Cox is a great person, a great client to work with. We use outside air coming in. We don't even turn on the HVAC. It's all fans and exhaust. The utility savings on just that and that creativity is significant. I'm going to pretty much have this in most of my presentations because I want you to understand what we're continuing to do on an ongoing basis to mitigate expenses. We have reorganized the operating staff structure like I just mentioned. We've renegotiated vendor agreements, utility audits and controls. We have hired a firm to monitor it's called Bottom Line Concepts. They actually put us in a different classification with Liberty Utilities, Empire Utilities. And we are saving a per kilowatt hour usage as well as a rate change. So that's saving us probably $4,000 a month, which is great. Our Venue Shield program still flourishes, and our clients want to know the confidence that they're going to have a safe meeting with a clean facility that is disinfected, will have no issues in the future. They're very safe with that. We already talked about the marketing fund being used actively, not passively, and the alliance approach that we talked about between the Chamber, CVB, the Hilton, and even the Landing to some point, and the Branson Convention Center team is working, and it's working very successfully. Once again, sponsorships and advertising opportunities are still there within the venue. And here is the results of this. The result of the success at the convention center is about economic impact. You know, once again, you know, someone in the business world may say, well, your business model is flawed, you're not making money. Here's where we're making money. It's not on the ledgers of the convention center, it's out in the community. It's when you have to wait for a table at a restaurant when the Missouri Baptist Convention is in with 1,700 people this past week. That is economic impact. So if we were to take the $336,000 and some change of operating deficit that the city of Branson puts into this operation in order to get $24 million back, your net is $23,873,000 of economic impact. Now understand what economic impact is, and I'll review that in the next slide, but it's a whole lot of things. It's direct sales taxes, it's indirect sales taxes, it's jobs created, it's hotel room nights, it's a lot of other things. But as a breakdown, from quarter 1 to 3, 64,000 hotel room nights are booked and allocated because this convention center is in existence. Estimated jobs supported, 8,892. Now, these are not my numbers. Remember, these are the Chamber's numbers using the Destination International calculation, which is the industry standard. And here's the example and the methodology that I had explained. And, you know, we want to make sure that we understand that if there's an event where locals will attend, it doesn't count as much, it's a weighted calculation, as a visitor coming in will. Because a visitor is going to have a hotel room night, they may go out to eat more, and they may spend in shopping a little bit more. While a local attendee may have a direct sales tax impact if they buy something at the convention center, as an example. Any questions on this so far? Regarding capital fund expenditures, we have one request on the table right now that is fairly significant as far as importance. I think you have all seen on the east side, I think it is, towards the railroad tracks and facing the landing, all of the beautiful timbers that are the architectural structure of the convention center. These timbers, and you can see, they are cracking. And this is normal. This is a normal course of its age for these large timbers to split. However, we don't want them to split anymore. We want to seal them. We want to also restain them. And these are somewhat structural. They hold up the cantilever, as you can see, of the fascia for the roof. So we want to make sure that those are solid for years to come.
Sam, have those been structurally reviewed by an engineer?
They have. HCW has determined through a structural engineer that they are structurally sound, but any further deterioration through cracking may not be.
I get that.
Yeah. These are solid wood, full-scale timbers. They are not pieced together. very interesting. This is a one piece, it's considered one
I
tree
remember when
each.
they were putting.
It's fascinating. And it's not a metal core. It is only like, I would say, you know how you have a corn cob, you hold it and you just stick to, that's what's going on here. This is on its own one large tree, and it's beautiful. But to do that, to make sure that these do not deteriorate any further from cracking or resulting in any other failure, we're looking at a stain seal product through a company that submitted a low bid of $63,000. The high bid was $146,000, so I think that's a really good deal, actually. So what's happening right now is HCW, or the Hilton, is taking care of their portion right now as we speak. You may have seen some of the lifts out there and some of the stain seal spraying going on. So the job is in process on their side, but what we're coming to you today is asking you to continue that while they're on site, if you should approve this today, so that they can stay on the site and costs do not rise because of, labor and another job. So any questions about the capital fund expenditure request so far?
The only concern I have with the cracks is not necessarily the load bearing on it, it's the water getting in there and freezing and acting like a wedge and breaking wood apart.
Yeah.
Has this been presented to Jamie? Is it in the FY22 budget?
So there's a cash capital reserve, according to their contract, that they put in about 4% of revenues on a monthly basis for this purpose, for capital purpose alone. It is a shared cash account. They hold it. We review it on a monthly basis. They have about $332,000 in that capital as of the end of September right now. So we are recommending that you all approve this, and this is this because you all double as the Convention Center Oversight Committee. This, in their contract, they have to bring it before you before they are allowed to do the expense. You all review it, you approve of it, and then that expense comes out of that shared cash reserve so that they can provide for that capital.
And this fund specifically for maintenance type issues, et cetera?
It is a shared account, and we track that, and they send us their statements by the 7th. No, we changed it to the 12th of every month. Yes.
How long will these people be on site? Are they projected to be on site doing this maintenance?
1 week.
So
1 week.
The extra work you're talking about extends them past the 1 week?
It'll be an additional 2 weeks. Yeah. It'll take them about 2 weeks to complete our job because it's about an 80-20 as far as linear footage is concerned with the Hilton versus the Convention Center. So we have 80% of that linear footage. Yep.
Jamie, I'd like to make a statement for clarity for those that are listening. If we approve this, the Convention Center already has $300,000 set aside for capital improvements. So this approval will have zero effect on our 2022 budget. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you. So our request is for you to approve this when appropriate. To wrap up, I want to always wrap up on a great note. And not just economic impact-wise, but customer service-wise is very important to all of us, especially you all, because, if you do not service your clients well, they will not come back, no matter how good of a time they had. This destination of Branson is in the top 5 of meeting planners' choices in this region. I would venture to argue it'd be the top 2. But once again, the operational staff at the Convention Center has done an outstanding job. And you see it's in the surveys and the percentages, anything above a 90 percentile, 90 plus is always good in this industry. And there's always going to be some slippage. There's always going to be something that has gone awry. But, to me, you should always look at not things that, if they do go wrong, because things will go wrong, it's how you react to them when they go wrong. And I feel that our team over there has reacted very well and done a very good job, 90 percentile plus, as you can see, and 95 in professionalism tells the tale. And as I always like to point out, prior to hosting, what's your perception of coming to Branson in the convention center, hosting your meeting there? There was a 77% satisfaction thought of a preconceived notion before coming. After they come, it's 92%. So we're changing the minds of our clients as we speak. And that speaks volumes to me because that says they'll come back. I want to open it up to any questions that you might have, but I definitely want to thank you for supporting our team at the convention center.
Two quick comments. When that last comment you made about them coming back, they also come back as individuals with their families because they've been introduced to Branson that they've never been before, right? And I want to address that testimonial. Those that were here back in the days, Mr. Herbster with Conklin, I don't think he would have made that same statement, would he?
Absolutely not.
I'm being facetious. That's huge. Where his mindset was, with his experiences now with you at the helm, that speaks volumes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think in my opinion, I think the single biggest impact that you have caused is you keep using the word team. And when you say team, it means the CVB, the Hilton, and the Convention Center are all working together for the same goal.
That's correct.
And that's, I don't know if you could put a number on that. So thank you. Any other comments?
Priceless.
It is.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for all that you're doing. You're definitely thinking outside the box, but you're saying there is no box, and getting so creative to make sure that the team served the customers so well to get these kind of results. I just really commend all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do
I
appreciate it.
want to echo something the mayor said besides wanting a little bit of crawfish and etouffee out of this deal. Since we're both from Louisiana, Larry was very on point with Mr. Herbster and Mr. Cox's statements, because as it was presented to us, it was gloom, despair, and agony on me. And it's really nice to hear that, and it was a major turnaround. I think it has everything to do with the attitude that you guys set forth down there and y'all's leadership. There is a marked difference, guys. And I think that's focused on you, and I appreciate what you've done. Since we're both from Louisiana, et toi.
Thank you so much, Alderman.
Ben.
Are
Appreciate that.
you, Madam Clerk, with his request for that 63,000, do we address that here?
Yes, so this is actually the Finance Committee's area, and so he's requesting the $63,234 out of the approval out of the Branson Convention Center Capital Fund expenditure. Correct, Jamie? Is that where we're at?
Yes, that is correct. And typically, we just ask for your approval. It goes in the minutes, and they're allowed to spend that after this meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. And I forgot the discussion
Thank you,
part.
Sam.
It's all right.
Anything you want to say? Too late.
It doesn't require going back to the Board of Aldermen, is what you're saying.
It does not,
Thank you.
because it's the convention center contract. Yes, sir.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of regular reports.
Okay. So we're going to go through these. Please feel free to stop me and ask if you have any questions. I will try not to go too fast, but I want to make sure that we leave adequate enough time for the discussions coming up. So this is your sales tax. This is the 10-year history of your sales tax. And this is, I'm sorry, it flashed. This is October's receipts. We are discussing for the financials, September 30th. It is on there as well. But we wanted to present these to you because these are the most recent ones that we have, so that you can see also October receipts or August's activity, September receipts are July's because of the 2-month time lag. So you have an idea right now of how well we are doing in the terms of sales tax. So at the end of October, it's 20.4% increase. At the end of September, it was a 60.9% increase on the monthly basis. And on the annual basis, right now, as of October receipts, we're sitting at 39.5% increase over the previous year.
Just to clarify that.
Sure.
That's the October report.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to remind everybody. So we're at 39.5% increase as of August activities.
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Votes well.
Again, this is the transportation tax. The next one is the public safety tax. These are a half-cent sales tax. And you can see at the end, the October receipts came in, we're still 40% above the previous year. Now, I think I need to also note, just keep in mind that the previous year, we were almost 15% down as we ended the year. So we have a financial gap to make up. However, we are still 40% above the previous year. So I wanted to note that as well.
Jamie, shouldn't we, because, and I appreciate what you said, we should be comparing ourselves in 21 to 19 and not necessarily 20.
Yes, I think that's more accurate. You can, and the best thing about this report is it gives you the opportunity to look down over the 10 years. If you take that 5.6 million on the annual basis and look down over the last 10 years, you can see that that 5.6 million is the highest amount that we've received in 10 years at that given point in time. So it gives you the ability to look back to see trends, if you like doing that for that purpose.
Yep, and that's a good point, Bill. And when we look back at 19, it's $800,000
Yes.
above 19, and 19 was a record year.
Yes.
Right.
So, yes, sir. So, I mean, it's really important when you're talking about that to keep in mind we still have that gap from 20 to make up, but you can look at those over the last 10 years and reason that out as well for yourself. So that's why we like to provide the 10 years there for you. Okay, next one, please. Thank you. The next one is your public safety sales tax, and you can see it's very close to transportation. It's just a half-cent tax as well. 5.6 million, 40.2% over the previous year at the ending of the year. At the October receipts. So you can see that. You can even see as of 2018, and 2018, we only had 3 quarters coming in, so compare that as well. But we are still trending better, much higher. So we have to keep in mind the funding gap that we have to make up, and we also have to keep in mind the future, but this is still a good picture, so I don't want to negate that as well. So we can keep moving if you would like.
Just a second.
Yes, sir.
I just saw an anomaly. Look at year-to-date amount on 2021, 921,000. That's obviously a typo, correct?
621,000?
No, it says 921,000
Wait, on what are you, which one?
February line item.
of 2021 year-to-date.
It's just showing the decimals. So it's 921,191.36. We needed to take the decimals off. If you can see, the rest of the numbers didn't have the decimals on there.
Gotcha.
So does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
We'll make that correction.
Jimmy, I'd also like to point out that in 2019 to 2020, through the October report, that fund was down about 800,000. The difference between 20 and 21, the fund is up about 800,000.
Yes, sir.
So even though we're having a robust year, when we factor in our best year, COVID year, and this year, we're about even.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing to note as well. So when you do your own analytics, it's really important to look all the way across. And we do these graphs so that you can see the uptrends and the downtrends, but you got to make sure and look at the big picture, and I think that's what you're doing. Thank you. We can move on, please. Thank you. This is the tourism tax. So September's receipts are August because we collect them in our office. So keep that in mind. It's 1 month behind instead of 2. And so these are still August activities. So year to date, we are 12.4 million versus last year at 5.8 million versus 2019 at 9.3 million. So you can take a look, like we had just discussed, all the way across and see for yourself that we have the highest receipts over the last 10 years. So we are still quite a bit up, but we still have that gap, and we still have to look at inflation and those kind of things when we're talking about the big picture, but this is still a good picture.
Again, would like to just, so everybody's aware, it's really not accurate to say in 2020, we had, year-to-date, we had 5.8 million, and now we're sitting on 12.4 million. Where's all the money? Because there again, if you look at 19 at 9.3, we had a reduction of about 3 million. And when you compare 19 to this year, we're up about 3 million, right? So there again, it's easy.
Big picture.
And that's for the media also.
Yes.
Because that's, if you looked at just those 2 years, year over year, that's not painting an accurate picture.
That's right, and that's why it's important to have that, those long-term pictures so that you can see that. Yes. Okay, next slide. This is just a breakdown. This is a breakdown of the categories in the tourism. We like to show you this because I think it's important for our industry, for you all to be able to look at this. And so you can see the categories that are doing better. And then just across the board, your trends are still up in every category, but it's important to just keep that in mind. Also keep the big picture in mind. We broke 2019 down for you here and 2020 just so you could do the comparison. Typically, we only do it 1 year, but because of the pandemic, it's important to make sure, just what Mayor Milton was talking about, that you keep that picture in mind. So that's why we chose to do that. Is there any questions on that?
Can I study that just a second?
Sure, absolutely.
Is this the one you've already sent us?
This is, I don't know if we send the we don't send the category in the packet. I don't believe. We just send the sales tax
Normally,
spreadsheets.
Melissa used to send it out to us on
Yes,
a-
we send the tax packet out, but I'm not sure the category one is in it. Do y'all recall?
It used to be.
It did, okay. Well, we can continue to do that if that's helpful. I don't mind putting that back in there.
I was looking at the issue of the nightly rentals and how much that has changed. Wow.
Wow.
It's made an impact, hasn't it? It's 1/3 now. Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome. Okay, will you keep moving, please? The next one is the rolling tax, and if you recall this one, this is where the businesses that submit to the state, this is the one where we go back, regardless of when we receive the monies, we go back and put it back into the proper filing period so you can see accurate activity. So, for example, if we get the tax receipts in October, but we have several businesses that have filed later trying to catch up, or they do an annual file, we go back and we put the activity into the actual month where the activity occurred so that you can see, right here, we are 34.5%. Increase, and you can see the categories all along the way, the monthly tax receipts by area. We're about 3 months. We have 3 months behind because of the way the filings come, but we like to show you this so you can see the economics of the city and how they're doing.
Jamie, help me here. The numbers you have highlighted for Branson Hills and Landing, which are TIF districts, is that representing, let's say, the Hills, which is a 50% or a nickel on every dime report there, or is that the full tax?
That's the full. So what you want to look at here is as if our year ended in July. If we had a July ending year, that would be year over year. That would be how well we were doing as of the end of July. So it's a 12-month period, and you can look at that, and you can look at the percentages. The next one is also maybe helpful for you in that area. That's the retail sales, because what we do is we take the sales tax and we go in and do that calculation to show a reasonableness for the retail sales coming in. If you'll scroll to the next one, thank you. You can see that, and that may be helpful for you. And we like to show that so that you can see the overall growth, okay? The next one is also the not restricted to TIF payments. So when it comes up, oh, could you scroll in? Thank you. This one takes out the TIF payments and shows you how much money and how well you're doing. Basically, in the other district, it takes out your TIF so that you can see what's available. And if you look at the end of, this is for the sales, and we do one for the tourism too, for those of you who don't typically sit on the finance committee. So you can see the tourism and the sales, both of them are trending much higher after the TIF. So about 5.4 million. And can you scroll up a little bit for me? I just wanted to show them the retail again. The difference is 2.6 even in retail. Again, I will show you the 10 years so that you can see the 10-year history even as of October and September. In this case, we're about to show you the financials for the ending of September. So keep in mind some of the ones that we've shown you today. Since we already had the October ones, I wanted to keep you up to date as much as possible on where we were sitting at there.
I'm sorry, Jamie, would you go back to that?
Yes, Tracy, could you go back, please?
This is the 1% city sales tax.
This is not restricted to TIF payments, so if you pull all of that out, the receipts remaining after the TIF bond payments, you can see that, and then we compare that same column to the 2020, 2019, 18, et cetera, so you can see that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, this is another report that we've created along the years, and this is kind of, because we are a tourism-driven city, it's hard to make, and I know I'm redundant, so most of you already know this, but for the ones who don't typically sit on the Finance Committee, I just wanted to give a quick explanation. This is, we take a 5-year calculation, and we look at the trends of where we believe the revenue is going to come in at what given months. We do that based off historical numbers, and we do that because you can't just take the budget and divide it by 12 and extrapolate it and then compare it. It's just not accurate when you have a tourism season, when your top seasons are June and July and those kind of things. You want to have a good comparison of where we're at and compared to budget. That's why we created this for you all to see that. And you can see the 2021 budget. We estimated 9.5 million of monies coming in. And you can see where it all sits. Then you can see the actual amount we received, compare it to the percentages where we thought we would lie. And you can see after all you do all of that, we are still trending much higher than where we anticipated to be at this given point in time in the year. So currently, if you know that we budgeted 9.5 million in this tax and we've already gotten the 11.4, we're doing much better than anticipated in the budget. And I will tell you, I know we've been talking about budget, so we did true the projections up when we did the projections, and I know we've talked about that too, but we went in and trued the projections up to where we thought we would be mid-year. So I believe we have about 11.5 million in the projections for 2021. Yes, so you will see we're already there. So we're going to exceed even the projections for 21.
So,
We've done that by October, is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Okay, very cool.
so the,
I'm sorry, did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
so the 2021 budget, that was the original budget or the revised budget?
This 2021 budget was the original, the 9.5 million. Is that the one you're
Yes.
talking about? Yes. I was just telling you that when we did projections for the 2022 budget, we went in and trued this number up because we were already trending above. Yes, sir. And you can see that we're going to exceed even what we trued it up to because we put in 11.5. And we're just about there in October receipts.
Yeah, it looks like we're about 2.5 million ahead of what we projected for this.
Yes, sir.
That's
If
a
we have a
number.
good Christmas, yeah, that's
Yeah.
very doable.
That's a good question. What have you projected out for the rest of this year if we just base that upon revenues from 2019? we're sitting at 11.5, we should be somewhere around 13.5, 14 million?
Maybe a little less, but I can do that really quick. Hang on, give me 1 second.
You'd add about $1,850,000.
So if you
Around
look at,
13?
if you just take 2020, and December receipts were 503, and November receipts were 378, that's a little more than a million. But if you, you look at 2019, 543 and 385, I think it's safe to say for this year, you're going to get at least another million. That would be a minimum, I would believe. In hopes we do better than that, but. Okay, can we keep moving? The next one's on your September 30th financials. We will be bringing a presentation for the third quarter before the board. So I wanted to show you this, thank you. And this is the general fund, and it's a picture of the general fund as of the end of September. So you can see, just real quick, that percent used in the middle, that assumes, if you scroll up just a tad for me, please, Tracy. I mean, up, yeah. You see that expect 75%? That would be if we took the budget and we divided it by 12, where we would expect to fall, okay? That's why we show you those other budget reports, so you can see the tourism budget, because we're a tourism industry, where we fall. You can also see the expectation of a straight-lined budget and where we would fall, okay? So that's what that means. Your revenues for the general fund are sitting at 17.3 million versus 2020 at 13.8 and 2019 at 16.2. So as of this time, right now, at the end of September, you are even doing better than 2019's revenues.
Jamie, you got an opportunity to explain something of a question that was asked the other night. If she would scroll back up, is with the issue of interest,
Yes, sir.
what it's utilized for?
Yes,
Does it go
sir.
into reserve fund? It goes into a capital fund?
Yes, sir.
Does it go back in? You have an opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you for mentioning that. I had seen that on other funds, and I wanted to point that out, so thank you. The interest income, this is exactly what I was talking to. We keep a minimum balance of about, I think I said 7 million, and that is pretty accurate. And we do that across the funds, and what we do, Jolynn, our cash accountant, she goes through and she determines in a given year, in past years, the highest expense that we have at any given point in time, the highest month of expenses. We make sure and we keep that in our local banks at all times. And so we keep a balance of about around 7 million. Once we reach that, and we watch it all the time, we sweep it out into our investment accounts. And even in our investments accounts, we keep some liquid because we are still earning higher dollars in those liquid accounts. We do the investments according to our investment policy. They also have, our investment bankers also have a copy of that. And so they track that, and we talk about it, and we look at that in order to get the better interest income possible. And I will take this time to say, our investment banker, he typically comes in and speaks to this committee about once a year, and we're going to try to possibly have him here. I don't know if we're going to get to have a December meeting, but if not, we'll have him in January. But he'll come down and speak to that. But he does a really good job. Me and Stacy and Jillian, we all meet and we talk about this, and it's pretty exciting to see, even when the interest rates are low, we are still trending well above where we budgeted. And you'll start seeing that in the funds. But this is what I was referring to. We track the money by fund so that we can make sure and give back. You'll see that in the public safety funds, those kind of things as well.
They disseminate back to their own silo of funding, correct?
Yes, we make sure and do that. Yes, sir.
And Jamie, while we're on this topic, would you put online, under our financial reports, the investment accounts?
The
An accounting of our investment accounts,
Sure, I can come up with that, sure.
okay? And maybe with some detail?
Sure, I
How
will
they've
do my
done.
best. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
How about we create something, I'll send it to y'all, see if it is what works, and then we'll post it out there. Just to make sure.
Jamie, I
everybody understands.
remember when we first started doing this, and the impact to the bottom line that changing this made. And so it was a great call because it has added many dollars to our bottom line because we've chosen to do this. So good job.
Thank you.
Help me with something before
Yes, sir.
you move on. I think it's real important. The mayor and the board, as far as expenditures goes, that's been issues that people are asking. You guys are making a killing off this. And I sit there going, yeah, what, $10 a meeting, mayor, somewhere like that. Could you just go over what that basically is? And maybe insurance, that whopping $10 per meeting that we're making?
That is insurance, that is the $10, that is also the expenses incurred. So honestly, the budget is smaller. You guys have only spent 64,000 out of 59. That is training. If you have training, if you have pamphlets, if you have materials, if there's food, which I don't believe there's a lot of.
I haven't seen any
and
food come across
Gina
us.
tracks that, and she's been pretty good to track that. So any training, any materials, any of those kind of things that is relevant specifically for the board and what y'all know, sir, that does not come out of the mayor and the board. So that's what's wrapped up in there.
Your Rib of the Month club's not in that, so you're good.
No.
There's one,
no.
we're rolling in it.
No. In fact, I will state to that, you guys, for the 2022, you had the training elevated and you chose to take that down for the sake of the budget. So yes, sir, that's what we were talking about. Okay, so if you look at the expenditures, you can see that as of the end of September 30th, 6.3 million versus 6.4 last year and 6.4 the year before. Keep in mind, this still had your 3% merit increases in there, although they're not all given out right now because it's based on anniversary date. There's a majority of them that are done. And so you can see that the expenditures are still down. So I'm going to use this time to look at the departments. They've done a really good job of watching their expenditures through this year, so I just wanted to call that out. And then the next one is your financing sources, and these are your transfer outs. Your transfer outs to the TIF for the debt service. This is your money that we paid to the convention center, the subsidies for the public safety for the parks department, and so that's what all of those line items tell. So that's a 7.5 million versus 7.3 last year.
Jamie, as far as the allocation of the public safety fund, would you sort of explain it to the group? Is that done on a month-to-month basis?
Sorry.
Or quarter basis, or is it, explain how that's done?
Sure. So when we decide on the budget, so for the subsidies, what we do is, if you recall, 2021 was the 75%. So we take that number and we divide it by 12, and we put an amount, whatever that amount may be, on a monthly basis in there. And so you can see that's why you're currently the 5.7 million, what was agreed upon in the budget. We're at 4.3 million in there right now because that's 75%, and that's where you should be at the end of third quarter for a straight lined issue like that.
So you're figuring that pretty much, that the total amount to be paid out will be approximately 5.735, correct?
It will be that, yes, sir, because we divide that by 12, and it's just a monthly fee. And same thing for the parks. The park subsidy is done the very same way. You can see that was 750,000 budget, and they've got 562 in there. It's at 75% of where it should be. And so at the end of September, you can see that your unreserved fund balance is sitting about 9.8 million. And keep in mind, there were no...
Jamie, I've got a question.
Yes, sir, sorry.
I stayed up with you Tuesday night, all of you. Thank you for your service. There was some still questions about where's the public safety tax gone, and I think it might be prudent to point out that the 0.5% public safety tax is 100% spent in the chart you do here, and down below it'll show the 5.7 supplement from the general fund. So it might help people understand that the 100% of that public safety tax is spent, and there's your accounting, but you also supplement that with $5.7 million. So there's really no question where that safety tax went.
You did a good job, thank you. Yes, I totally agree with that.
He actually reads his materials. I'm proud of you, Darrell. You're a good man.
And typically, and I think it should be said that typically that subsidy amount is 7.6. And for the parks, it was set to be $1 million. And because of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, we had to reduce that. The 2022 budget is back up to full amount. Okay, so here's the Public Safety Fund, and there's the taxes and franchise, and what Jerry just alluded to, that taxes and franchise fees number is the actual taxes that go in. Down at the bottom, you're gonna see the transfer in from the general fund, okay? So there's the 75%, you can see that. And you can also see the internal service fund going out. So if you'll scroll back up, I'll discuss the revenues really quickly. Their total revenues are 5.1 million as of the end of September, and versus 3.6 last year as of the end of September, and 4.4 at 2019. So you can see the 2019, the 2020, and 2021, we're still bringing in more revenues than when we did in 2019. And I will point out the interest income line as well. You're about 162% higher than budget. We are conservative in that because we simply, especially last year in the budget process, we simply did not know what the interest rates were going to do. So we were conservative in our budget, but we have gotten 73,000 versus 45, and that is as of the end of third quarter.
The expenditures on there, I didn't notice any cutting grass on any of that.
No, sir, I believe the lawn mowing is done through Parks and through Public Works. So there you can see, and I will tell you that we have split, this is the summary, and you're gonna see the next two, we've split the police and the fire, and so you can see how that works too. So I just wanna show you the summary real quick. You've got the police at 4.1 million expenditures versus 4.5 last year and 4.4 the year before. And then the fire department of 3.1 million versus 3.6 and 3.9. And I will tell you that they have some pretty good people in their admin offices. A couple of them really watch their budget and they really look at it. And I think those two departments do a good job. And I'm going to call out Haley and I'm going to call out Crystal because they both do a great job. And I will mention, they both came from the finance department.
Did she
But
pay
they
you to
do,
say that?
and their thought process is good, and they really help those departments, so I just wanted to say that. Okay. So you want to scroll up, and then this is your other financing sources. Again, this is your transfer ins, and this is your transfer outs. Again, you can see what I just talked about. You can see also the code enforcement transfer. You can see the internal service fund transfer. And you can see everything there. And once that's completed at the end of September, you have 4 million and some change. And then you have 4.5 versus last year and 5.7 versus the year before. A large portion of that difference in 2019 is what I alluded to earlier, was the subsidy and the 25% reduction. You are sitting in total at a almost $8 million reserve. And then I'll show you the split and the breakdown here if there's no questions on the summary. Okay, if you'll go to the police. Yes, okay. So you won't see history against this because we did not break this down until this year. But moving year over year, we'll start to move it over and you'll be able to compare and see history against this. That's why we typically want to show you the summary so you can see that history as well. So here is your police fund, the public safety. There's the taxes coming in, $2.8 million total revenue. The interest income was budgeted at $24,750. So far, we've brought in over $40,000 for that. And you can see the intergovernmental, a large portion of that is grants. That $100,000 was budgeted at the 911. Usually we get that around December. We haven't gotten that in yet. Not sure really what that amount is going to be. And then there's your expense category, which we have already talked about. And then your other financing sources, you can see how it's broken down for the subsidy, the code enforcement, what goes out to the TIF, and the TIF that was created after this public safety went into effect. You can see all of that. The 250, we haven't moved over. We are still working on their cars, and we'll move them over before the end of the year for their vehicles. So that's the amount for the 6 vehicles that we move over to the internal service fund with our enterprise lease, and then we track those leases inside the internal service fund, so it won't affect their operations year over year.
So Jamie, I know this topic will come up later, so the reserve fund balance, I'm not sure what the headings are up there, the $2.1 million figure, that is actual?
The 2,095,000, the 2.1, that's what we anticipated.
And
That
what's-
is the budgeted column. The 4.2 is where we're sitting actually. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you'll scroll down, I'll show them the column headings. There you go.
Actual, but, okay.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the fire department. Hey, Keith, it's hot in here, I'm just saying. Okay, so.
You need more questions.
Okay, so here's the fire department, and you can see it's the same structure that we did with the police, the franchises, the taxes, 2.2 million, and you can see their interest income as well, 32,000 versus 20. And then you can see their expenditures down below, and if you go down below, you can see their transfer outs, that 375 out of that 500,000 that we're trying to build up their internal service fund for another fire truck. And you can see the transfer coming in from their subsidy. All of that, your ending fund balance as of the end of September is about $3.5 million. Yes, sir?
The 375, is that set aside for the new engine for out near Point Royale? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, thank you.
Give you a chance to step back and cool off.
I believe, if I understand the internal services fund correctly, that portions of that would be for lease purchase for the new engine 1, which we'll be bringing before the board in November.
Okay.
And I believe the finance department has set aside funding for the new Station 4 construction and design. And that will be done, I believe Jamie set aside 1.5 for 2 years and $500,000 for the third year, where he has been able to strategically place us where we'll pay for that station cash in hand. And so it's going to hit those two things. We still have to address the fire engine 4, Station 4, but with we're timing out construction. The custom engine will take over a year to do. The fire station will be bringing before you in November with the architectural firm for approval, and then we'll have a better timeline on design and construction for that building as well. So we'll have to map out that process, the engine behind it, and the staffing with that as
Right.
well. So that project hits two things right now.
That's what you covered with us in the public safety meeting. I appreciate that, Ted.
Yes, that was
Now,
correct. And
the
we're going to.
money set aside for the new station is where on this report?
The money set aside for the new station is in the reserve. We have not moved it yet, so you will see that.
Okay, thank you.
And two, I will note that we're going to be bringing a lease purchase, an agreement before you to buy another fire truck for Station 1 to replace the old one. That should be coming next month. And we have most of the documents ready. We've already gone out to bid for the banks. We got an extremely low rate, so we were very thankful for that. So we'll be bringing that before you before the end of the year.
And Jimmy, for clarity, that unreserved fund balance of 3.5,
Yes, sir.
is that where the funds are that are set aside for the construction of the fire department?
Yes, sir. So 1.5 million in '21.
Okay,
So
follow that.
1.5 million of
It's
that
right there.
3.5 is set aside.
And
It
that
is
includes-
in that reserve balance, and what we will do after the end of December, when we're truing up the years, we move that over, certainly.
If I remember correctly, and just help correct me, this would be a two-stage so much money in 2022 and so much money in 2023 towards that station, it wouldn't all be dispersed at one time? Did I miss something on that?
No, that's correct. We did 1.5. According to the budget, what we planned on is 21, 1.5, 22, 1.5, and $500,000 in 23. So that would be about $3.5 million for the station to try to pay cash for that.
Okay, thank you. Is that where our ribs are in that money as well? Just checking.
No, sir.
All right.
So
I
Jamie,
think the ribs are on your own.
so Jamie, while we're here, and here again, I'm just trying to get numbers for future discussions. So this unreserved fund balance for the for fire is 3.5. Yes, sir. And in that 3.5 is 1.5 earmarked for the construction.
Yes, sir.
Would you scroll back up? to the-
Go to the public safety, the police portion, please.
So then, in the police unreserved fund balance is 4.2.
Yes, sir.
What is that money earmarked for?
So they have capital, and your one-times come out of that money.
Yep.
And you have to keep your 20%, which we do a 30% on top. We do 10%, you know that. So, so we do capital and your one-time, and your required reserve amount comes out of that. So for, I'm doing this out of memory, so just bear with me, 700,000 for 21, 400,000 for 22. Those are both earmarked for radios, but that's the amount that we've put in there for that. They also have a one-times, and then obviously, your cars will come out of that too, to transfer over to the internal service fund when we do that. So you see the budgeted amount for the internal service fund transfer. Once we make that transfer, that'll reduce your reserve as well.
Is there any money built into that for the new police and fire station? The police station.
Police station, there is not, but keep in mind, when we talk about that, I believe we said in 2023, we had to take out the debt service because of the sunset for the police station. If you're gonna do a 20-year debt service, 2023 is the last year you can do that. We did the amortization based off of, I believe, about 13 million, so your debt service starting in 23 was, I believe, around 924,000 that we put in going forward for those 20 years.
You feel safe with that? I'm just asking.
Well, so if the station is going to be 13 million, then I feel safe with that because we ran it, we sent it to our financial advisors. They mapped it for us based on the current market. So they have done a great job for us in the past. So I have no reason to doubt their numbers whatsoever. But here's the caveat with that. You know, I'm a conservative person.
Inflation.
So inflation, building materials, so you have to keep a track on that. If we say it's a $13 million building, then we have to build a $13 million building, and we might have to make some adjustments along the way. Other than that, if the cost goes up, then we need to adjust some other things to balance that out. Does that make sense? Okay.
Wasn't there, Mayor, the discussion that TCAD was interested in working with us and sharing construction costs in that stand?
That's correct. I believe, I know it got slowed down, but I believe they're still very interested in that. And quite frankly, we've talked about the optimal would be for a area-wide communications center. That was taken to the voters sometime back in several years back and did not pass.
Oh, boy.
We're trying to do the best we can from our perspective and working with TCAD and the Sheriff's Department to see what we can do without having to get a tax increase to get us all in the same room, because it's far more efficient for everybody.
That's an interesting concept. You think that the Taney County Sheriff might assist us with this, or the county and this building? Is that what I'm hearing? Maybe.
I think we would probably move on.
Okay. That'd be a coup, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, Jamie, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so we'll move on to the tourism tax fund. Okay, oh, whoa, I think, did you pass it? Yeah, thanks. Oh, sorry, you didn't. That was just my eyes. Okay. Did I pass up the convention center? I apologize. You can go back to the convention center. Okay, so here's the convention center, and I know Sam did a really good job of speaking to you on where they are. So I'll just run down through this. The 2.7 revenues versus 1.3 last year and 3.8 in 2019. And you can see those revenues and the breakdowns and what they are. You can also see the expenditures at a little more than 3 million versus 2.4 last year and 3.8 the year before. So if you compare them to 2019, you can see that they're still keeping their expenditures down, and what he alluded to with the utilities and those kind of things. If you want to scroll down there, you can see the other financing sources. So that $316,000 is the amount that the general fund budgeted to offset the losses that were anticipated. So we do the, we move that over. And we also, on the tourism fund, that you can see that $500,000, that is what is set aside in the budget for their marketing dollars. And you can see 402,000 versus 122 last year and 65 the year before. And so their ending fund balance reserve that is on our books is 476,589. That is the convention center. Okay, here's the tourism tax. The tourism tax franchise fees, you can see it's 12.4 versus last year 5.8 and the year before 9.3. I know we've already touched on that. And so you can also see the interest income. Yeah. You can see the interest income and the grant that some of the grants that we've gotten in to offset some of those as well. And you can see year over year, we are at 12.6 million for revenues, 5.9 in 2020, and 9.4 in 2019. And then you can see the expenditures here. A majority of that is your marketing and your debt service. Keep in mind, I will say this, the last debt service payment is in January of 2022. So you'll see that go away. So that is good news.
And the monthly amount of that debt service, how much approximately off the top of their bean?
Well, we've already paid 100% out, so for next year, I believe it's about interest and everything. I'm going to say approximately, because I can't remember exactly, but around 2.5 million for the dollars to pay off. And so
You'll see that debt service go away.
Monthly amount, cost.
Yeah, it's a semi-annual payment, so we pay it twice a year. So so adding back, if you can look at this, and it's already at 100%, that is 3 million, I'll say 3,500, 3,500,000 that has come out for expenditures of the tourism. That won't come out next year. You'll have about 2.5. So next year, as a result of paying off that debt, you're putting $1 million back into the pot because you no longer have that debt service. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, and so also, you'll see that when we pay off the COPs as well. So you can see that too. And if you'll scroll up, so your expenditures were 4.7. Versus 4.1 versus 7.5 the year before. The 7.5 came from because we paid off some debt issues in 2019 as well, and then you saw the reduction in 2020. So here's your other financing sources for the tourism fund. You can see the convention center marketing is in there. Transfer out to the general fund. You can see the TIFs as well, and the 76 CID, the money coming back in that they reimburse us for that 9.2 million. They pay that on an annual basis. The 500,000, they budgeted for another 500,000 for this next year. So we do the same thing we do with all of those, and we divide them by 12 and we add them to monthly, so you can see where we land there. So 1.8 million expenditures there versus 1 million, a little more than 1 million versus 1.4 the year before. So you're sitting at, I know we talked about this the other night, but about a $21.1 million reserve there. And once we pay off those COPs December 1, and I'm going to talk about that too a little bit later. Once we pay off those, you're going to be a little more than 13 million in there, and you'll still be building upon that for the next couple of months.
Make sure I've got this right. So we're saving by paying this off approximately $200,000 a month if I was to amortize that on a monthly basis.
So I would say off of are you talking about the COPs?
Yes, ma'am.
Off the life of the debt, you're saving $885,000 in total.
Right. And that's how many years remaining?
That was 2027, June 1st of 2027 was the payoff on that.
300,000 over 5 years.
Yeah.
So in that, what are we proposing to do with that difference in that payout?
What are we proposing? I mean, that money will go back into the tourism, and that'll be monies available for capital and infrastructure.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Just trying to get it. Thank you.
you're welcome.
That's a lot of money, too.
The next one is the transportation fund, 5.4 million versus 3.8 in 2020 and 4.6 in 2019. Again, you can see the interest income. We didn't budget interest income in here, but 24,000 came in there, so we're going to see a growth on that quite pretty well. So you can see the garage expense, the streets expense, the MS4. In comparison, we spent a little more than 2 million versus 1.8 last year and 2.6 in 2019. So our expenditures are down from 2019. And then you can see the transfer, the other sources and uses. And you can see 1.9 million versus 1.6 and 1.8 in 2019. The ending result is your fund balance is about 4.8 million as of the end of September.
What do you project by the end of the year on that fund balance? It's 4.8 at this particular point, which is October, which really is August.
I don't have that answer in front of me, and I hate to just try to do it out of memory, but I will
not
get
gonna
that
hold
for
you.
you. Yeah.
We'd be looking at
Well,
6
because we're
million,
doing
5.5.
capital, we're about to bring you some capital out of that. So I just want to make sure that I've accounted for everything before I give you an estimate. But I think it's still going to be pretty high, but it's not going to be that high.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then this is the TIF debt service, and this is how we track, basically the money comes in and then it goes back out for TIF debt payments. And you can see that's inclusive of the Branson Landing, the Hills, and the aquarium all together. Okay, you want to keep going to the 160? This 160, that is one debt issue. It's the 2011 bonds, which we are looking at to possibly refinance and save money and time off of that. So we'll be bringing that before you in the next couple months, too. Here's your capital projects funds. You know, we haven't done a whole lot with capital projects. We're hopefully gearing up to be able to do more. But as we pass the ability to do those capital project funds, the money come out of the operating source and it goes into the capital projects funds, and we track those projects and we track the CIP in those projects.
Jamie, question on some of these that we're going to be looking at refinancing. Where are we at with, were we still waiting for the Moody's rating to be adjusted?
S&P.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, and I will tell you that I got an email this morning from them, and they told me that they were wrapping up their final review. They just needed one more item from me, so it's good timing for that question. We'll be sending that to them as soon as we're done with this meeting, and then hopefully the wrapping up their final review probably means by the end of this month. Maybe we'll have an answer maybe next week. That'd be good.
And for the public, what that means is it's similar to personal credit score, right? When you go borrow money, the higher your credit score, the less the bank's going to charge you interest. So the higher the credit score with S&P for the city, the better rates we can get on the bonds.
Absolutely. And in fact, the ones that we're bringing before you, now, in a couple of months, we're trying to do a private placement for those rather than going to the bonding market as a result of not having the credit rating yet. And we're still looking at really good deals on that.
Thank you.
Okay. And you can keep going. Well, next one we'll look at is the Parks and Rec.
What in the world's perpetual fund?
That's a fund that we have to keep over for cemetery. And sometimes we get $150 annual, but sometimes we don't. So it's just one that we do have to keep open, and it's typically $5,210 in there. So here's the Parks and Rec Fund. And I will show you, their taxes, 1.8 million, their total revenue is 1.8 million, and you can see the category, the campground has 906,000 at the end of the third quarter versus 539 in 2020 and 672. So that gives you an idea of how well that campground is performing for them. And the same thing for other things like their tournaments and even their ball programs. So you can see at 1.8 million in revenues at the end of the third quarter. 2020 was 1.1 and 2019 was 1.5. So they're even doing quite a bit better than they did in 2019. And your expenditures are at 1.8 million versus 2020 was 1.6. And so they're trending pretty close on expenditures with 2019. And so then you can see the subsidy that we transfer in from the general fund. That's $750,000. Remember, that was a reduction of the 25% next year. In the budget, we have planned to go back up to $810,000. And so we're at 75% for them as well. And so if you'll scroll down, the ending reserve fund balance here is $1,388,426 at the end of September. Is there any questions?
Can you make projections off that like I just asked before? Are we going to be looking at about unreserved balance about 1.5 by December?
By the end of the year? Well, here's the deal on that. Because we're going to do some transfers to the internal service, and we're still bringing before you for capital, so it's subject to whether or not the capital is approved and those expenditures get made. So I'd hate to give you a number, even an estimate, until I've had a little bit more time to look at it and know it. But I will get that to you if that's all right.
It's possible that it would drop because of that. Is that what
I'm sure it's going to drop a little bit, but I will tell you their fund balance is up, and what we can do and what we like to do with the parks is we like to take a portion of above their 10% code that they have. We typically try to keep 15% in there, because if you only keep it down to 10%, then next year it drops lower. So what we want to do is we try to keep 15%, and then we move the difference over to their internal service fund. And it's been really helpful for like the things that break, like the HVACs and stuff that you just cannot help. She's used that quite a bit, and I think we're all thankful that we've had it. So, is there any more questions on that? Okay, so sorry, I'm trying to move pretty quickly so we can get to the rest of it. But water sewer fund, here is a look at the water sewer fund, 8.4 million versus 6.7 versus 7 million in 2019. And that is your water and your sewer rates. And then your expenditures are at 9 million, a little more than 9 million, almost 2 million, 8.7 million versus 2020, and 8.9 versus 2019. So really, the expenditures have been kept pretty close to 2019. And you can see the transfer out. We like the water sewer capital. We have not done that yet. And so that will come out. Here's your unreserved fund balance. Now, I will say this, I say this all the time, but I just really want you to be aware that that 65 million is not cash available, okay? A majority of that, and I will estimate this because I have this number in my head, about 56 million of this is assets. Okay, it's assets that are accounted for in this fund. So you have roughly, at the end of 2021, I believe we had projected around 11 million cash available for the water sewer as part of their reserve, okay? And you can always, I will point you out to the audited financial, the audited comprehensive financial report. That lays that out very well for you. So if you ever want to go in and look at that, there is a section, because it's a proprietary fund, that it gives you their, it gives you the listing, and it'll show you the cash available versus the net assets, okay? And it'll break that down for you very well.
Jamie, before you move on, Would you go back up to the revenues, please? When we look at our revenues from 2019, 2020, and 2021, I had a question on why the 2022 budgeted revenues were less than what our actuals have been.
I don't have that. Does anybody have a magazine? Can I borrow one of your magazines,
You got it
please?
right in
I just
front of
want
you
to
there,
look at.
sister.
Do I? Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Blind as a bat.
Well, keep in mind, we're at the end of the third quarter, too, so we still have a whole quarter to go. But you will also see in here, you will also see penalties and interest and those kind of things. And your question was, why are we budgeting? Can you ask me that again?
What number is in that book that we're projecting for the revenues for water?
For water, 3.7 million.
And our revenues for 19, 20, and 21 are, I'm not sure what's added in that number.
Oh, well, just keep in mind, we still have 3 months to go of that revenue. This number assumes all 12 months, too.
What page should he be operating off of in the budget for 2022?
On the magazine is page 57.
Thank you. And that $3.7 million figure is the total far up and right? Am I right?
Yes,
on that?
under water
Okay.
revenues, under
All right,
charges
gotcha.
for services.
Just for reference.
No, that's no problem. And also, I think it should note that that also assumes our increase that was just passed, the water sewer increase.
Okay, so, thank you for pointing me to the right page. 2020 actual water revenue was 4 million.
Yes, sir.
Our revised 2021 projected revenue is 4.3.
Yes, sir.
That's sewer, isn't it, or?
Put on your glasses. I'm reading water.
Oh, okay, I was going off that, so.
Well, keep in mind the penalties and interest are included in that number.
I'm just using water.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess, and that may be the question, because if we had 4 million actually come in 20, 4.3 million is projected for 21, 3.7 is projected for 22, 7, 3, that's $600,000.
We are,
Less-
I'm sorry, go ahead, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
600,000 less in projected revenue.
So the answer for that is we are assuming quite a few less penalties and interest because we're assuming that we do that agreement with Public Water District Number 3. And I know we're very close to getting that. We've had several meetings with that. But we're assuming that we don't have all the penalties and interest attached to that for the 2022 budget. And the penalties and interest get quite high, if you can imagine, on the bills. And so if we have that contract in place, we have the ability to capture some of those revenues, and hopefully those bills will get paid on time and we won't have the penalties and interest. So we are assuming less because of that contract. We kind of have to.
So my understanding is the contract with Water District Number 3 will allow, we're going to have an agreement that says for the properties that Water District Number 3 serves and the city serves sewer, if the customer is behind on sewer, the Water District Number 3 is going to agree to turn off the water if our sewer is not if our sewer is not paid.
That's correct.
So I'm trying to connect the dots.
Sure.
By making that agreement, have we been collecting $600,000 in penalties?
I think the year before it was more than that in penalties.
More than
And we have
600,000?
to write off, yes, sir, if you look at the 2020 actuals, and I don't have that detail in front of me, but we do have to write off a portion of those. But keep in mind, when we bill those penalties and interest, it automatically goes to revenue. When we bill it, not when we capture it. So when you bill it, it goes to revenue, and then it sits out there and it draws penalties and interest if it's not paid in a timely fashion. And so at the end of every year, we do have to write off a portion of that, assuming that we're not going to get it, but we still go to try to collect it.
You know, I think I'm following you on that. Isn't that figure should be higher because of that?
Yeah,
The 2020 should, but we don't, I'm trying to figure out. You have a better way to, you can, she's the one that tracks this, so she
Okay.
might better
The revenue
explain it to
shows-
you than
The
me.
revenue shows lower, so I think his question is.
In
because-
2022, the revenue shows lower?
Yeah.
And that is because we're not assuming that we collect the money
That's
that we
my
usually
question
do.
right there.
I think we got it.
would you, please? Thank you.
We thought with 2021, a lot of people.
There's people
Yeah,
listening.
yeah. With 2021, we thought a lot of people had cabin fever, and so 21 was a really big year. We're not sure we're gonna get as many people into the city in 2022, and especially when we started going down when the Delta variant, because we started working on these numbers when the Delta variant came around. And
Sure.
so we had to project that, and, yeah, and the number we wrote off last year was $1 million of unpaid.
Okay, that's important. So we wrote off the 1 million of unpaid penalties.
Penalties and interest and bills that,
We still try to collect it, but we still have to write it off.
So Jamie, is that 1 million that we're referring to, is that in this water revenue, or it's the water revenue less that equals what we received?
it's in the 2021 numbers, and at the end of 2021, we'll write it off. 2020, we already have written it off in that
Okay.
3.5.
So then in 2020, we brought in 4 million in revenue.
But we haven't, we'll probably write off, in
still have some to
2019,
go.
we wrote off 600,000. So the write-off increase was $400,000, because we have people that have, there was one person I just looked up, she moved in 2009. She has never paid her bill. Yeah, I was gonna say, but her bill is now 500,000. She's never gonna pay that.
I think you're going to have to come closer to the microphone for
Okay.
the people to hear that.
And it was an example, so we're not gonna, we don't need to speak specifically, but that was just one example of what we have to do. So when we do the billing, and she does it really well and explains it a lot better than I do,
Well, I
but,
think that we got to answer why there was
Yes.
such a major drop-off.
and that's why she's done a good job. That's why we're pushing so hard to try to get the contract in place, because we saw, and I think she'll agree with me, that when we did the American Water contract, we saw a change in that quite a bit. So, you'll start to see it level off if we have that contract. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm still trying to connect a dot. Once we have the agreement in place with Water District Number 3, and the customer is behind on their sewer payments, then the water company is going to agree to turn off the water if they don't keep our bills current.
Yes, so basically, we have an avenue now to shut it off versus before we didn't. So basically, they didn't pay their bills. They kept accumulating these penalties and interest over and over and over, but we did not have an avenue to shut them off.
That's why I guess in my mind,
Yeah.
because of that, I would think that our revenues would now increase because we have a vehicle in place to be able to threaten to shut them off if they don't keep their bills paid, and then we wouldn't be writing off $1 million or $600,000 in a year.
You might see an increase in operations, but the piece that you're not going to see is the penalties and interest, because now we have an avenue to actually shut them off and quit accruing that penalties and interest. So you might see an increase in operations because people might start paying their bills, but it's not going to be to the tune of the penalties and interest that compound on a monthly basis. And that's what Jolene spoke about. So, well, sorry about that. Yeah. So when you see these numbers, you see that it combined. You see the penalties and interest combined with the revenues. When you see the budget numbers, when you see these numbers on the financials, you see the split out. And if it's helpful going forward, what we can do in the future is we'll split it out on the budget too, so that you can kind of see the flow of that.
Well, these are just huge numbers we're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
they are,
$1
sure
million
thing.
write-off,
They are.
$600,000 write-off. In 20, did I hear it right? In the 2020 numbers, that includes what we have already written off.
Yes, the 2020 numbers are actually audited numbers, so yes, that'll include everything. And we go through a process with the auditors at the year end for that.
So we're projecting to bring in $300,000 less in revenue in 2022 compared to 2020. And that, is that right on the map?
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind, because of the penalties and interest and how they compound on a monthly basis, they get high. They get
So are
quite a
these-
bit high.
Thank you, Jen. Are these numbers compounding that we actually collect, or are these numbers compounding of what we have to write off?
If we are able to collect the penalties and interest, yes, because they will have to come in and pay the penalties and interest and their bill. And we do collect some. We do that, and that's why we have to, when accounting says when you bill it out, you hit revenue. So that's why we have to do it that way. And so we do collect it, so it needs to remain there, and you can see that through the 2020 numbers. But if we have an avenue to shut them off, what you'll see is less penalties and interest, because more people will be coming in paying their bills because they don't want their water shut off. Does that make sense? Because that's really what we're hopeful. These penalties and interest can get quite large.
So it'll be a more accurate representation of the revenue.
Absolutely.
once
That's a
that-
great way to put it. Yeah, yep.
So, okay, and I'm almost there. So just the last question. So when we send out a bill to a customer, we're not reflecting that as revenue, correct? We only reflect that
It hits, when the bill goes out,
When
it
the
hits
bill
accounts
goes out-
receivable and revenue, yes, sir. And so that accounts receivable and revenue, that accounts receivable says, we need to collect that, and then we do the billing, yes, sir. Then when it comes in, when that amount comes in, it hits cash and accounts receivable. That's how it works.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, I have a quick question. There's $1 million in donated funds for 2020. Is that from the Taney County Sewer District, or where does that come from?
Let's see, I'm sorry, where are you seeing that at?
2020 actuals under non-operating revenues.
Non-operating revenues, am I on the right page? Okay,
Page 57.
okay. I was looking at the financials, I apologize. So you are in the magazine, Jerry, and you are looking at, which one, I apologize, for 2020, you are looking at, I'm not seeing it, so I want to make sure I'm seeing it for you.
Donated funds right under the interest income.
Oh, yes, that was $1,073,000, and that's the grant offset, and I know you already knew that. I'm sorry, I just was not looking at 2020.
So was that the Taney County Sewer?
Stacy, is that specifically the sewer sales tax reimbursement? Because we had some other ones. She's looking at it right now, but we'll get that for you. Because we had some other grants to offset for that, so I want to make sure if that's specifically the sewer sales tax or not.
So we can't look there anymore?
No, we can always. Kendall and Stephanie do a really good job. Every year we go to try to capture some of that sewer sales tax for our revenue. So you can look in the 2022 budget, and we have a asterisk on the capital funds that says that's the contingent based upon the sewer sales tax. So what they do is they earmark the capital items that they want reimbursed by the sewer sales tax that they think is going to be a possibility, and then they go after and they apply for it. And then if they they say, and they agree to that, then we go through with the capital and we get that reimbursement. If they don't agree to it, then we don't do that capital in that given year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did something happen? Obviously, okay.
I think
Well.
that means you're done.
Well, if y'all want me to be, I'm okay with that. Okay, so the, really the next ones were the internal service funds after that, and those are ins and outs. Those are the transfers that we make from the operating funds. Those are transfers we make from the operating funds into the internal service funds. And we started showing you this so you can see the buildup of those monies in that internal service fund. And then the next couple of reports, and I will tell you for these internal service funds, just because we're getting to the end of the year, something I should note for you all is that those internal service funds, we show them to you separated as operating. One comes from the general fund, and you'll see that segregated from the one that comes from the water sewer fund, the public safety, and those kind of things. But at the end of the year, they are known as an enterprise fund, and they all get rolled up into one fund, one proprietary fund, and you'll see that alongside of the water sewer fund in your annual comprehensive financial reports. Okay, so the next one, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to the other things. The next one is your operating fund balance. This is that cash report that we did. This report is to just give you the assurance this is the amount of cash that we're reporting by fund, and you can always check us on that. And I always tell you there, you can tie that back to your balance sheets, and then you can tie your balance sheets back to your income statements through the fund balance. The only two that there are caveats with is your general fund and your police fund, and that is because they have those minor funds in there, and we reconcile back to those minor funds. For the police, you have the inmate security fund, the police training fund, the forfeiture fund. Those are those minor funds that will be in there. And then you also have the safety fund and the insurance fund for the general fund. So, and once you look at those minor funds, it all consolidates and we reconcile that. So just FYI, I always like to tell you for assurance for the finance department that you can always check us and you look at all these three reports and tie them all back together. And if they don't tie back, please feel free to give me a call and ask me a question, no problem.
Jimmy, what the asterisk 120 fund is showing the capital reserve funds held by the city only?
Yes, and that's zero. Yes, sir. Once we did the transition from the management companies, there was an amount left in the reserve, in that cash reserve that we just talked about for their capital, and that is city-owned funds. So when they left, they turned that money back over to us. It then became cash monies available for the convention center's use, of which they used that out. I believe during the pandemic, we allowed them to use that remaining reserve amount to help them out with their operations. And that's why we're showing that to you this there.
And so the asterisk just, I see there, right on the convention center. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. And so we break that down for you through public safety because it's special revenue. We break that down for you for tourism. They have their own bank account. And then all of the other ones you see in the operating fund balance is kept in what we call a savings account over at our local bank. And then in an effort to try to hurry, the next reports are your balance sheets, and that's the ones where I tell you that you can tie the cash back to the cash report, and you can tie the fund balance back to your income statement, with the exception of the general fund and the police, and I know I just talked about that. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. And if you all have any questions and it's outside of this meeting, please feel free to give me a call or stop by or something. We'll be glad to walk you through that stuff.
Is there anything that in your report so far that gives you any type of concern moving forward? You feel comfortable with our financial position overall?
As of the end of September, yes,
And I know
sir.
these are just assumptions, I get it.
As of the end of September, they are actual numbers, and I do feel comfortable with that and how they are laid out. So this year was an anomaly, but I think we're pulling out of it. And honestly, even during the pandemic year, I will tell you, from my perspective, this city held its own and did much better than a lot of other cities did. So we are thankful and blessed. So. Okay, so the next ones, these next reports are just informative only. They are just to show you some of the other things that the finance department does and to kind of keep you track of what's going on. These are your business license and they're your categories, and then we give you a total. We also give you reports about the bids that have been done throughout the year and their opening and by department. So we give you that, and we also give you the consumption reports for the water sewer. And all of that is kind of just to help you gauge what's going on. Consumption reports have always been helpful to me, so I wanted to make sure that you all were able to see them, because you can always tie back to the ups and downs in the water sewer. So
Let me have a chance to look at this
certainly,
before that blows over.
yeah.
It's important. Because that has a direct bearing on how we're doing, the amount of water coming, or going out.
It was helpful through the pandemic. It was, these reports are very helpful. Philip does a very good job.
Okay. 2021, year-to-date, running total, 508, it's going to have to be, these.
518, 219 as of September's running total. And then you can see the running total in 2020 was 415, 227. If you look at the variance column at the end, it will really help you. So 2021 over 2020, we're 24.8% ahead.
Okay, I want to take this back to the question that Mayor and I have asked. With the increased amount of consumption, wouldn't that be an increased amount of fees? And I'm trying to get the difference of what you discussed.
Yeah, sure.
Was just penalties and interest, I guess.
Well, that'll be an increased amount of billings. Whether or not we can collect on them, it could be penalties and interest. So, yes, and if you look at the next column over, the 2020 versus 2019, you can see 2020 was a huge decrease in consumption for water. But you also have to take water and irrigation into consideration. We provide that report for you as well, so you can take a look at that. But I know the penalties and interest is, so you can see that. So these are informative reports. They are reports that anytime you want to take a look at or you have questions, we have a lot of good professionals in my office that can answer questions. They know their stuff. So, and I will be happy to do that as well.
And Jimmy, just to wrap up, if you wouldn't mind, and no rush, I know you're in the middle of stuff, but if you would send me maybe a breakdown of the penalties and interest so I can just get my arms around.
Certainly. Do you
The
want that?
significance.
And that is that's also in the detail budget worksheet. So I can send that out again if you want, and you can see 2020's penalties and interest versus water sewer versus sewer.
That would be great. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. The next one, we just highlight, we've already gone through the public safety financials, but we're just going to show you this. We just keep this graph up here as requested, but we've already walked through the financials for you. And I want to get to the end results of the three options the ideas that we have. So if there's not any questions against that, if we can keep moving, we need to get these disbursements approved. And and then we have some budget amendments I'd like to touch on. We're going to be bringing those back before the board as well. We rolled it the other night, but then I want to talk about my,
That previous graph we were just on,
yes, sir. Can you go back to that public safety graph?
I've asked a couple times, and I know it's going to be a discussion, but that chart is obviously ugly, and one thing that I think is missing,
Okay.
put on your boxing gloves,
I got no fight left in me, so you go right ahead.
is the 7.6 million that is transferred from general fund to the public safety tax fund on an annual basis.
Okay.
That is a fixed amount and has been fixed since the tax has been passed.
That is true.
If we started from today and said there was going to be a 3% real inflation rate over the next 5 years, that 7.6 million loses $1 million in spending power.
Okay,
Just due to inflation.
okay.
So bless you. So long-term, I can understand a chart where we're showing what expenses are going up 5% every year, right? So I know anybody would look at me and say, we don't have the money in the budget to add in a inflation rate on the 7.6 million that we contribute to the public safety tax. The other side of that is, I know right now we're struggling for funds, but it doesn't make it right to say, we're not going to increase the public safety tax fund based on inflation. Every department receives, rephrase it, every department experiences inflation, which is no different than this, but I think it's out of balance to have a fixed amount. And just to make a point, if it's never changed, 5, 10, 20 years from now, can you imagine anybody talking about the public safety fund? The 7.6 has been fixed. And in 10, 20 years from now, how far out of balance that will be just because of inflation?
If it's not adjusted for inflation.
So what,
So what I've asked is, and if you would, on this chart, and I understand what this chart is saying, I was asking for a separate chart that just assumed a, whatever's fair, 3% inflation rate, meaning the 7.6 million is increased by 3% every year, and I'd like to see how close those lines become.
sure, I believe we gave the 5% numbers at the budget meeting, but we can do that if you want me to do 3%.
No,
We
no,
did
if
5.
you sent it at 5?
Yes, and we did the 5, and we discussed it going out, and I discussed the effects on the general fund too.
I must
But I
have
will-
missed that meeting.
I did not put it into a chart, so I don't mind doing that too, if you want me to put it into a chart. But I think we'll put it into a chart, but I need to show you the effects of the general fund as well. So I'm going to do both charts simultaneously and put it in there so you can see that.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And I apologize, I probably missed that.
That's okay. I stated the numbers, but I did not put them into a chart, so I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Didn't that also have some additional money flowing back out, though, so there was a net effect?
So like the general fund accounts for a lot of items that cannot, the public safety fund cannot afford right now. So that's more than about $1.5 million on an annual basis. So on top of the subsidy, the general fund is still paying for more than about $1.5 million of expenses for the public safety because they simply cannot afford that. So if you look at that, you could assume that we are doing more than that 7.6 simply because of those expenses we're paying.
But in that projection, it actually flowed back out, I think.
It did, I believe so, yes, sir. But I will still do the chart for you, no problem. Okay, the next one is the disbursements. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the next ones are the disbursements. We just need approval of those disbursements. I'll be right back.
I've reviewed and I make a motion to approve those for August and September.
Who second? Who second that, please? Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Can we have just a small break?
Yes, there's,
Oh,
yes.
okay,
There's
now,
2 months.
now when we say a 6-minute break, we know that didn't work Tuesday. Well, the first one came close. Second one, not so much. So, to be fair and accurate, we're gonna have a 7-minute break. We'll see how that works. Call this meeting back to order. Let the record reflect, we had a 7-minute break. Uh-oh. No. Go away.
Hey.
Okay. For the record, this is all on Alderman Skanes. Oh, we have a quorum. Jamie, you want to move to the next item?
Yes, thank you. So the next ones are some budget amendments that we are going to be bringing before the board. Some we've already talked about this past Tuesday, but I wanted to make sure and let this committee be aware of them as well. Typically, they come here to this committee first, but for the sake of time, and we had to roll some of them the other night, so I wanted to speak on all of them here. The first one's the Laserfish software module. It's a separate module. Basically, to boil this down, is they're getting a grant for it, so it's going to be paid for. And it is a searchable and accessible by our citizens, so it's another web module for Laserfish. So there is going to be an ongoing annual $1,600 expense, but the software itself is going to be paid for through a grant. The next one is that COP loan that we have already talked about. We did that in the board meeting the other night, and we had a double read on it. So we've already put in the 30-day notice, and by December 1st, we are going to be paying off that debt to the tune of $7.8 million. This is what I was talking about earlier. That's going to leave about $13.2 million left in the tourism, and we're still going to get more money in October, November, and December, so that'll accumulate as well. And so by doing this, we're going to be saving $885,000 off the life of the debt. The next one we took to the board the other night as well, and that is a sewer main, and we are getting reimbursed for that as well through the sewer sales tax. And so we can keep moving.
That was from the county, am I right?
Yes, sir. That's correct. And these we brought before the board on Tuesday night as well. These are transferring monies from their operating funds to their internal service fund. And so the general fund had $350,000, and then what was left over of the capital that wasn't going to be allocated. So $366,285 from the general fund to the internal service fund. And a majority of that money is earmarked for IT technology so that they can do what they need to do to keep the city moving. As we all know, that's what's going on right now, is IT is moving. So we wanted to make sure and build up that service for them as well, so they had the same opportunity as the other departments. The next one is the Capital Projects Fund, and I believe I read the other night what was coming out of there, and I know it's I'm trying to remember, because I don't have that information before me. There was a replacement of soccer goals, the campground replacements and the pads for that. There was, Stacy, what was the 483 capital? I'm trying to remember. There was one I can't remember, and it was the majority of one. I talked about it to the board the other night. Can you read that? Do you have that list available?
Yes.
Thank you.
Campground site improvements was 26,500. Soccer goals, 7,200. Snow plow for the Parks Department is 7,500. The intrusion detection prevention appliance for IT, 142.
Thank you. That's what I couldn't remember.
And HVAC.
Yes. And all of those went before the board and in this form and fashion the other night. The actual expense for that will go at the next one. Transportation fund, the internal service fund, that is to build up the internal service fund. As you all recall, we said we would do a mid-year financial analysis in 2021, and this is as an effect of that, because we went through, we determined that we had some money to free up. I know we've already talked about this, but I just wanted to remind you that that's where these items are coming from. For the Parks Fund, we were able to move about $300,000. $120,000 of that will be used for the trash truck for the parks, and then $180,000 of that will be used to build up their internal service fund more. The next one is, and this is just the actual expense of what I just talked about. So we're moving the funds, and then the actual expense will come before the board. You will see the transportation, that 2,000, and the parks, that 4,000. That is to account for a possible lease payment through Enterprise in 2021. So if we're able to do that, and we're able to get those vehicles in this year, we'll have that, maybe 1 or 2 months of that lease payment that we wanted to make sure and account for and do the budget amendment now. It is possible that we may not have time to get those, and if we don't, that money will just not be spent and it'll just be in that reserve. So we wanted to make sure and account for that just in case.
But it could possibly be rolled into 2022.
Yes, it could, that's right. So depending on when those vehicles are available and purchased, yes, but we wanted to just make you aware that this is a possibility. Okay. And then here, this is for the next item, so when you all are ready to discuss that, those are the various budget amendments that we will be bringing before the board. So I just wanted to talk with you all about that. Again, the board's already seen a majority of that, but they will be looking at the expense side of it in a few weeks.
So before we move on, does anybody have any questions of what we just covered?
Sure, absolutely.
There's where I've got the questions. The money for police and fire, what would that be used for? Public safety fund? Cover equipment, overtime?
The internal service funds, so can you scroll up, please? Yeah, that's on the stipends. We're not there yet. He's talking about, yeah, kind of making me dizzy.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, okay. So that was a separate item. These are any money that we are able to move to the internal service fund. The 250 you'll see, that's a budgeted amount, so that won't come before you in the form of a budget amendment. But you will see that money is, we take the entire cost of the vehicle, we take it out of the operations the year that it's approved, and then we move it to the internal service fund, because for police vehicles, it's a 3-year lease, and we manage that lease out of those, and then so on and so forth. So then at the end of that 3-year lease, we have the option to sell that with Enterprise. We get that check, we put it back, and then it reduces that replacement car's payment. That's the idea behind it. Yes, sir. Was that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out whether the money had to be dispersed immediately or it's pulled into the internal service fund to be dispersed when needed, going down into the future.
And it depends on if it's a vehicle that's accounted for. We do track those through the lease, but when you hear me say that's to build up the internal service fund, that's an amount that has not specifically been earmarked yet, but that's in the internal service fund that's available for the directors to properly manage things as they come up. So like if they have an emergency purchase or something, they will have budgeted an amount in their internal service fund that they can go ahead and use without having to take a 3-month time span possibility sometimes for the process.
Let me see the police and fire thing, please, real quick. I think you
That was the stipend, and we actually scroll forward. This one is just, I don't think we have any police on here.
Well, it was from the, whatever you call it, fund.
Yeah, when they scroll down a little bit before, that was, we had gone into the stipend discussion. So we don't want to do that just yet. I think
No.
he's still talking about budget amendments.
So did we get any money in from the American Rescue Plan for police and fire?
So are you ready to move on to the stipend discussion
No,
yet?
there's a follow-up question.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with stipend. So the money that comes into that fund does not displace any general revenue funds that might be used for that, or public safety funds, or whatever else?
So let's talk about the ARPA funds. So the ARPA funds, that's money that has come into the city. Okay, so that is not earmarked for any specific, there's 5 categories that you can use. The one that we've talked about using is because for us, it's a fairly simple process, and it's easy to document because it's a revenue loss calculation. And I think I mentioned this the other night, that our revenue loss is around 16.2 million based on the calculation that we were able to do. And so we're only getting over a 12-month span about 2.4.
Right.
1,173,000 that we've already gotten at the end of September. And then we're going to get another allotment like that next year, 12 months later. So that, when I talk about the ARPA funds right now, that's what we're talking about. There's also a possibility for us to go after state ARPA funds because they have a much larger bucket, and we have a lot of items out there that we do want to go after, and we've already created a list for that, and we're ready when they present that application to us to go for that. So, I mean, it just depends on the projects and those kind of things. There's 5 categories that you can detail out, but the main one we're using right now is revenue loss because we have such a gap.
It didn't answer my question, though. So if we get the ARPA funds in and it hits an account, there's not a corresponding amount of money taken out of that fund and put back into general revenues. It all stays in the same.
It all goes into the ARPA fund.
Thank you for.
Yes, because that's a grant, and that is one that we have to, accounting-wise, there's a lot of rules that we have to follow with that, so we've got to
Understand.
keep that separate.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions with that one?
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
So Jamie, are we about to leave the budget questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a few questions before we do that.
Okay.
In our 2022 proposed budget, are there any capital expenses for Highway 76?
Capital expenses for
Water,
Highway
sewer.
76.
Sidewalks, street lights?
I just want to make sure that we're getting, so, let's see, we're already doing the underground, we've already accounted for that, so that's not what you're referring to. Yes, and a majority of that is through the CID, but the undergrounding, we've already accounted for that and getting, we've taken care of that through the White River contracts and those kind of things, so we've accounted for those. Is that what you're referring to?
Well,
I'm
when you say
looking.
we've accounted for those. What I'm referring to is that and I understand the agreement is not executed yet between the city and the 76 CID. I think it's called a cooperative something agreement.
Yeah, we're reworking that.
We do have an agreement with them. We are considering an amendment to it
Okay.
to help with,
Okay.
I believe what you're referring to.
Because I just want to,
Cooperative, okay.
yeah,
I
I just want to
understand.
make sure our budget as we have today, the city is going to receive monies from the 76 CID because they owe the city $9 million.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that we're not showing expenses in this budget that we know we're going to be offset by the revenues from the 76 CID.
If that was the case, we would have accounted for the offset as well, so the net effect would be 0, but I don't see any
Okay.
at this time. We were focused on the undergrounding, of which we are, hopefully that's going to take place pretty soon, and
Yeah. But it won't have a financial impact on the city? Okay. Another question, I'd like to ask this committee how they would feel about when we have all of these statements. I would feel more comfortable if we showed what the actual reserve requirement was, so we could deal with the real numbers. And then maybe, because I know you add it for additional buffers, I would just like to be able to look at what the real number is. So instead of looking at a statement that shows less a 30% reserve.
Oh, the budget, okay.
Equals how much we have. If the reserve is actually 20.
okay,
Say, here's the 20% reserve, here's what's left over, and maybe a separate line item,
sure,
additional 10% buffer reserve.
okay. That's fairly simple change, no problem.
Is the committee okay with that? Any comments, questions, input?
Good with it.
Yeah. Are we ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so The other night, we talked about this in detail, and I think some of the ideas, I think we talked about possibly presenting you 3 options today, just to try to come up with, because we're going to bring the budget back before you, I believe, on November the 18th to talk about. So for direction, this is, I think this is the 3%, correct, Stacy? So this is something that we have already talked about. So let's try, we don't need to focus on this one, but what I wanted to talk about was the 3 options that we were able to come up with, and I'll read those to you. We can have that discussion, and then once we make that decision, if that's a decision, then we can move forward on so that we can help revise that budget and bring it back for you on that. So what I'm going to do, I'll read those options, and then if that's okay, and then we can have that discussion once I get through all 3 of them. Is that fine with everybody? Okay. Okay, so option 1 is to go with the balanced recommended budget, include a 5% stipend for 21, a 5% stipend for 22, add back social services of $60,000 and use the leftover ARPA funds to cover that, and add back the $50,000 to the health department and use the ARPA funds to cover that. For option 1, what this will do is this will maintain that balanced budget. In addition, it'll give the employees a 5% stipend this year and a 5% stipend next year, and it'll allow us some time to go through to discuss how we're going to offset some of those other costs. Option number 2.
Before you move, what's the cost of option 1?
Okay, so the balanced budget remains the same, but the cost of the stipends for 2021 in total is $815,000 and change. And we passed 3% the other night, but I wanted to bring back doing the 5% instead of the 3%. So that will be, next year will be $815,000. And so what that will do is it'll give us about a remaining $355,000 this year and a remaining about $355,000 next year. So with the leftover funds, we'll offset some of those other ones. So that's option 1.
So let me clarify.
Sure.
The ARPA funds is 1.173.
Yes, sir.
Option 1, 5% stipend this year, 5%
Yes, sir.
stipend, and this is for all employees across the board.
Yes.
For next year. The social service, Taney County. So in this year, out of the 1.173, we will have $355,000 left over. When we receive the $1,173,000 next year, we'll have $355,000 remaining.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And that's based on that 5%. So that's option 1. So option 2 is to go with the balanced recommended 2022 budget, include a 5% stipend for all other departments except for public safety, include a 10% stipend for public safety for both years. What that'll do, it'll use the entire amount of the ARPA funds, and we'll have to come up with about $8,600 to cover the rest of that. But I would say that we can do that, and that will give the public safety 10% this year stipend and 10% next year, and all other departments 5% in both years.
That's police and fire?
Yes, sir, it is. And so that'll give us, what that will do is allow us additional time to come up with new revenue sources, or maybe expenditure reductions based on the priority-based budgeting and the services. And in addition to that, it'll give them 10% each year that will help offset some of their raising costs. It will sustain them for 2 years while we have some time to really dive into the increase in the pay scale and how we're going to offset that. And doing all of that will remain that balanced 2022 budget. The other thing for option 2 is, I think I talked about it a little bit the other day, is we would offer our department, our resources to help these social services seek ARPA funds as a sub-applicant for on behalf of the city for the health department and the social services. We know that's available out there, and we've allowed sub-applicants before, so that would be one way that we could help offset some of that, and we would sit down with them and help them do that. And that way, the balanced budget remains the same. We're helping the employees at the same time and the public safety at the same time, and we're doing everything that we can to help social services and the health department gather potentially more money than what they could if we were to give it out. Option 3.
Before you move on.
Yes, sir.
I understood everything you said, I think. And that would leave a shortfall of how much?
Well, from the ARPA funds,
Yes.
it's $8,688 both years. And that's something that's doable, that we can find something to offset. That's a small dollar amount, and that if you were to choose option 2, we would take care of that.
So if I can, just to repeat it back for clarity.
Sure.
Option 2 is a 5% stipend for all employees for 2021 and 2022, a 10% stipend for public safety, which is police and fire, for 2020.
2021 and 22. Yes, sir.
And our finance department will assist the social services, not with funds, but assist them with our talent to help them obtain their own ARPA funds.
Yes, sir. And they would be a sub-applicant of the city.
A sub-applicant.
Yes, sir.
Let's address that just real quick.
Okay.
With that, I'm trying to go back to my cost allocation days and staff use and full-time positions. Is that would allow for a X number of months to keep the same type of full-time equivalents online until that money runs out, and we would either have to help them achieve that ARPA fund, or that individual will be laid off sometime in the third or fourth quarter, that extra inspector for the health department, which I really got concerned with, because the big demand comes out of Branson. Are you guys aware at all that they have gone and talked with the county for assistance in that? Is Branson paying for anything that's done out in the county? It's a complicated question, and I'm sorry.
It's not one that I can answer, but I can answer is I am not aware of what they have done. We do review their financials quarterly, and we're in the process of doing that now. I can certainly call Lisa and talk to her about this, and I think we have a good relationship, and I'll be more than happy to do that.
Okay, it goes back to my further question. If we don't move to fully fund those extra positions, what is they asked for? What, 180 versus 150?
Mm-hmm.
180 versus 130.
30.
They asked for 180. They've been getting 180. Our budget
Sure.
has 130.
So if we move along with this, then that 50,000 would run out sometime within 2022 if they don't get that ARPA fund. Am I correct?
Well, it would run out at the end of this year, and then next year we'd start paying them 130.
Okay, but I guess what I'm saying is, we're still with that 130. They could still carry that person on for a while in anticipation of getting ARPA funds.
I would assume so.
That would be a Lisa question.
But that would be something that I would like to talk to her about. I don't want to answer on her behalf. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
just saying it's logical.
Yeah. It's logical, but
Because they
I'm
wouldn't
not
wanna
sure
lay it
of their
off.
process.
Because
so-
if we don't have that person, then we don't get that job done for the city of Branson.
That's right.
And it's sort of,
But there's so the city of Branson is still part of the county, so we do still get inspections. We just wouldn't get the extra one. But yes, I know what you're talking about, and I will give her a call, bring her in, we'll talk about that, and
Sounds
I'll
good.
help answer those questions
you.
for you. Sure, no problem.
And then before we move on, I don't know if this is the Jan, Ted, or Chief Matthews question. This proposal number 2, adding 10% to public safety for police and fire for 2021 and 2022, will that get us to where we need to be?
Can I answer one portion of that, please? It will not, it won't raise their salaries, but it'll give them a lump sum of 10% of their salaries to help sustain them while we move forward to make the decision to how to pay for that. Does that make sense? But it'll be 10% this year and 10% next year, which will be a good chunk of change for them.
But then when we get back to 2023, we still have to look at
Yes.
their current
Yes.
salaries, and
Yes.
we're gonna have to figure out some way to make up. So
I'd say we
really,
start
the
doing that
10%
now.
stipend is a Band-Aid
It is.
to help them out.
It is.
This year and next year, but
Yes.
it does not affect their salary.
It
So then
doesn't.
we're still scrambling, trying to figure out how we're gonna do their adjustments to their salary and afford those.
Right,
But-
so I'd recommend we start now. If we are allowed, if we go with option 2, 10% each year is a good chunk. It'll help offset them. It's probably more than they would get with the pay scale increase. But it gives us some time to start now to try to figure out what revenues we can bring in, what programs we can offset to help fund the increase in
But I just don't want
23.
us to think that this is not their salary. This is
No,
just a stipend to it.
This
So-
is something to buy us some time to give them probably more money than they would have gotten originally, yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from Tad.
And to clarify, the merit raises are still in the budget on top of that.
Yes, they are.
I don't need to speak now. I'm going to just rephrase it. I think all city employees should hear that in the 2022 budget, we have proposed a 3% increase in salaries, our normal merit. What a blessing in today's world. I think with the ARPA funds and trying to correct losses in 2020 and 2021, you're making a commitment back to employees. What a blessing, thank you, to propose that. The third step is we as a city, this group, our directors, our administrators, our finance department, you have been solid the last 30 to 45 days saying we need to address the problem. Step 1 and 2 takes care of business today. What a blessing, thank you. We continue to work for tomorrow. I think we're all committed to that. And I think the employees should hear that commitment.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you very much.
The one thing I wanted to point out was that with the proposed compensation plan, we're looking at, for 2022, taking all the public safety folks and injecting them into the pay plan at the lowest level possible to where they do not take a cut in pay. That may not include the full 3% increase or things like that. So I think what Jamie's put together with an additional amount for the stipend, I think that would fit perfectly.
So in theory, then, there's actually, under this proposal, there's actually more money in their pocket versus the compensation plan.
It would be an addition to that compensation. They're still going to get money, additional, they're still going to get a raise with the new compensation plan. But it's just not going to be to the full breadth of what everybody would expect on that, in that respect. So that additional 5% on top of what other employees would get, I think fits perfectly in that situation.
I think, obviously, Jamie, on Tuesday night, we went down this path together, and I know, and you've stressed the whole time, and I think these first two options keep the importance of having that balanced budget for next year without having to revert back to a budget that doesn't work. So we accomplished that, which is obviously hugely important for you, but we also get to accomplish addressing the employees and giving a benefit with money that we have just available that's not going to cost us money. Of these two options, it sounds like you like both because at its core it keeps a balanced budget, and I respect that and I appreciate that. Is that my only question between the two? Is there anything else that we were looking at with the ARPA money, if we use it all under option 2, which is potentially fine? I guess my question for you is, under option 1, is there anything else we would have been doing with that difference of approximately 700,000 that we wouldn't be able to do if we selected option 2 versus option 1?
I mean, it's a good question. So we don't have those monies earmarked right now. And I think that's what you're asking. But that 300, under option 1, it allows us to kind of give back to some of the things we had to take out to balance. And all employees still get 5%. But with option 2, obviously we need to use all of that for the employees. You're right, I do like either option. And either way, I'll be fine with, because we still have a balanced budget, but we're still giving back to our greatest asset. It just matters, we didn't get a lot of ARPA funds, so we don't have a ton to do with, and we still have the option for other projects and stuff to go after the state and get some of their funds. So I think it's a really good use of the money.
So to do it for this purpose, it's safe because we have the money,
Yes.
and we don't have anything we would be missing out on under option 2 if we selected that option.
Correct, and we didn't earmark it. So if we had earmarked it already, then I would say, in order to do this, we're gonna have to give up this and this. But we hadn't gotten to that point yet. And what better use of the funds, since we didn't get a ton like some other city did, what better use of the funds to give back to the people that work so hard for the city? I'm 100% backing on either option. Either way, I do have a third option. It's not my favorite, but I'll still say it.
Yeah, so we still have a third option. I was just trying to clarify option 2. So Chief Matthews, what is the police department going to say with the option number 2 proposal?
Thanks for the opportunity to speak, Mayor. I can't say it any better than what Ted said, but thinking back to the other night when the workforce addressed the board, I think part of their comments said they understand the struggles that we have as a city. I believe that they truly want the commitment to bring all employees to a competitive market value for the work that they do. I think more departments outside of the police department have a retention and recruiting issue. Kendall told you about his, Cindy told you about hers, so it's beyond just the police department. So all of us go back to, Jamie's team, Jan's team, the work that you're doing is addressing all the needs. I think for all employees, it's just the commitment that we're going to get as close to market value as we can.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
just got a question for Jamie, and I'm sorry we just keep peppering you, but that's what you're good for, Are there any hidden issues with the issues of stipend? And I think it needs to be fedded out a little bit. The issue of insurance or retirement or Social Security, what's all going to come out of that stipend?
No, the stipend, when the check, it's the taxes and the loggers. So they'll get a check of the 10% or the 5%, and that's subject to the typical taxes and the loggers' contribution.
Social Security?
Social
FICA,
Security, yes,
SUDA.
sir, all the normal taxes and the loggers. And it would, no matter what.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's hear answer number 3.
And we
This
can
is like
stop
picking a
there if you
door.
would like, and I don't even need to mention
What's
option
that
3.
game? You have door number 1? Or the box?
Well, I didn't have a ton of time, and we didn't have a lot of time to come
Sure.
up with this, so. Okay, so we would use HR's pay matrix, right size all the staffing levels, of course, and then we would use the fund balance reserve to fund the ongoing operating expenditures, the additional to cover the additional cost. And I have a little sentence at the bottom that if we use those reserves, that those reserves will be depleted a lot sooner. So it is not my favorite option, but I wanted to make sure and bring that option available to you.
I'm sorry, Jim, would you share that again, please?
Yes. We would use the matrix that
So this would be no ARPA money?
Right, that's
Okay,
exactly right.
No ARPA money, and so this is another.
That is correct. It would change our 2022 budget. We would have to go in and do some work. It would use our reserves to help offset that. It would not use the ARPA money, but I wanted to bring that option as well. I like the other two better, so.
Well, that's an interesting point. Would the ARPA funds then in turn come in behind that to fill those fund deficiencies? So it's sort of, as we refer to as robbing Peter to pay Paul?
So it's not an ongoing solution, it's one time. So we're still going to be stuck in '23 with the idea of having to still come up with a way to fund that. And then we'll just pray that '22, we don't have natural disasters that we need that money for somewhere else.
Well, it sounds like, option one and option two allow us to do this and not go off half-cocked, if you will, with an actual funding mechanism in place and allow your team and the other directors to, and I think Jan even said it, options one and two actually get more money in the hands of the staff under either option right away.
Sure.
Versus, and this is something I didn't fully understand on the compensation proposal, the quote-unquote adjustment in pay or raise or however you want to look at it, it didn't necessarily go into effect as soon as that plan would go into place. In other words, it was based on anniversary dates
Yes,
and
that's
different
correct.
things. So to allow us time to really address the issue, funding, competitive pay, all that as a package, it sounds like to me, option one and two, give us that time, get more money in the hands of the pocket of city staff with, and allow us to have, most importantly, and for you, a balanced budget heading into 2022.
That would be very nice, yes.
I would like to hear from other committee members, please.
Hey, I'll take a crack at this. It's, oh, sorry.
Excuse me, guys.
I'm on the Branson Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association, so I've got a lot of close action with both fire and police. They need money now, and the way Chief said it earlier, I think he is so on point that you guys are going to show that you're behind all these people, and by doing it now, it gives us time to work out a salary situation next year, because now is what counts, and they need your support.
Thank you.
This doesn't preclude us from going after any additional ARPA funds to help them out in this process anyway.
I think there may be more we could go after.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's federal monies out there too still, so
And
we're
those
tracking that
monies
too.
could follow around, go back into that
Yes.
fund?
That's right.
Yeah, okay, never mind.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ted?
I'd like to address one more item that you and I have worked on, and you've hit it a couple of times, and that's the social services. And I want to make sure it's very clear, 2 points, in my opinion. Director Roush has presented an option for them to come under us as a subcategory and work for those funds. I've sent grant opportunities to a couple others and have had no feedback. In other words, work for it a little bit. That have come down from the state of Missouri. The second point to that is, you've heard the phrase, you all have said it, we've said it, our number one employee asset, or our number one asset is employees. Y'all are sitting here talking about championing, and staff have heard me say it, our mission truly is to provide effective fire, police, water, sewer, streets, some form of parks, and everybody that supports us. We have to focus there first. If we're taking taxpayers' money to give to the 5 or 6 not-for-profits entities, we're mission drifting. It's hard for me to say that because I've served on that committee.
Yeah.
But I know we can support them in other ways. Chief Matthews is a card-carrying member of the Arts Council. His family goes to their plays. I need to go buy a library card. I can support them in other ways and champion that in the community. But that's, you're turning a focus to the employees as a mission right now. And I think that's huge.
I think that's our intent, and I appreciate you reinforcing that.
Thank you, Chief Mathis. I know that Alderman Fenton and I went through, had a tour of the faith community, and once again, I was just surprised at the amount of services they provide our community, and they can take $1 and turn it into $20. And so, but thank you for saying that, right? Appreciate it. Other committee members' input?
I'm just going to tell you, looking at everything, I like option 2. Option 3 scares me a little bit, because we're taking down our reserves, and so I think, we've said it, Mayor, I think the last time we had joint budget, I think we all agreed, let's get 2020 done, let's get our people taken care of, and then let's get to work. Let's roll our sleeves up. Let's get to work, and let's figure this out so that we don't have to keep having this conversation. Right now, we need to take care of the number one asset of the city of Branson, and that is the associates. And let's make sure that we're not putting ourselves in any risk right now. I think, like I said, number 3 scares me a little bit. Number 1 is generous. Charity begins at home. And so let's take care of the people that live in this house. Number 2 is my opinion.
Thank you.
Does that mean doubling our $10?
No, that is not in the budget.
It's for full-time employees.
Jamie, I just.
That's under a want, not a need.
Jamie, I just want to take a second. I know Tuesday night was very stressful, and we were all kind of just scrambling. And I didn't. I hope I opened a can of worms, and I apologize.
No, you didn't.
Because I do know how important this budget is, and I know how important the city's finances are. I was asking questions that I didn't know the answers to, and I just was looking for information.
Sure.
So, but what I want to stress is I appreciate you so much, because I know none of us got a whole lot of sleep after Tuesday night. I'm sure you didn't get a whole lot of sleep yesterday. I just appreciate you taking this, looking at it, coming up with 2 fantastic options. One not great option, right? Option 3.
No.
But 2 fantastic options for us to consider and weigh in on, while still being a steward of the city's money. And at the end of the day, I cannot thank you enough, even though I ask questions that you're probably just pulling your hair out, like, why is he doing this? But thank you, no matter what, for being a steward of the city's money and for not, just keeping us on track. So thank you truly for putting your effort into this and coming up with these options so quickly. And it sounds like options that are well received amongst everybody. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome, and it's my staff and myself too, amazing. And what I said is sometimes your jobs are hard and they're difficult, but if the people that support you and are all around you, they make it so much easier. Sometimes it doesn't for people, but for me, my staff, I love coming into work every day because I love being around them too. So they work just as hard as I do, so thank you for saying that.
Any other committee members want to share an opinion?
I have something to say here. First of all, thank you, Chief Martin. Empowering our social services is one of the best gifts, and then providing support while we're empowering them, because I'm sure they were all hit that they may not get any funds this year. So now being able to work hand in hand with them, and it is their passion where they are serving, there's going to be synergy in the monies that they can apply for. So I think that's a fantastic idea. And thank you, Jamie, for all the work you've put into this. I really, really appreciate all the conversation that's taken place today. I think some great ideas have been presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So just right quick, I'm on board. I think that with the other committee members down here, that it makes perfectly good sense to take advantage of those dollars. And so I would support either 1 or 2. But I am not a fan of what 3 might look like. It gives me a little concern for the future.
So are we being asked to vote?
Well, I would like a recommendation because we're going to bring the budget back before you, I believe the 18th Okay, so on the 18th, so if I had a recommendation of which one you all wanted, then we could make it work and bring it back before you all in one package. The idea behind that is you've already approved the 3% for this year.
Right.
So if we go ahead and approve the other 2%, we can just cut the entire 5% this year and maybe get it to them before Thanksgiving.
Oh, so we're not going to vote, but you're asking for a consensus.
Just which one would
Yeah.
y'all like for me to work on?
So the question I'll ask, Lisa's looking at me. The question I'll ask is, I know. So the question I'm going to ask the board and the committee is, if you are in favor and would support option number 2, please say aye.
No, no, no,
No.
no.
What I would,
You just did that.
maybe a recommendation.
Yes, just a
that would be a vote.
recommendation.
Maybe a recommendation would be to ask the finance committee, because they can vote on this topic.
Yeah, it's just a
Instead of the
recommendation.
board.
I've made a recommendation a while ago of option 2.
You don't
Okay.
have it on the butt.
It's just a recommendation that I will use to take to the board, so you're going to recommend that.
I would certainly second that.
You, Michael? Number 2?
Yes, absolutely.
You too, as well? They all said 2.
Fair enough.
I think that's the vote. That's not a vote, but that's the recommendation.
That's a recommendation that looks
And from-
like a vote.
And from
It's
what,
just guidance that gives me
and
the
from what I've heard
opportunity.
from the board, I think that the recommendation of the finance committee is heading in the right direction.
Very nice. So Lisa says, no, 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 no.
Thank you, Lisa.
So are we, thank you, Lisa. Are we moving
That's
on
it.
to another agenda item?
I think we just had the project status report out there, and then otherwise, that, it was just the director's report. Am I missing anything? I think we're,
Point of order, I mean, if it's more comfortable that we have a vote, then I'm not, is that a better record of what's coming out of this committee?
I think this is just an advisory committee,
Okay,
so,
that's fine, I just didn't want to circumvent something.
yeah.
I think Jamie asked the question and knows what direction we'll support if she presents it.
Yes,
Good.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Fair enough, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think then we can be done.
Really?
I don't have a further director's report, so unless you want to ask me a question or something, we can, that's up to y'all.
So we do not need to have further discussion of the 2021, because what we've recommended today does not change or will not change what you've already done.
No, so the other night, Tuesday night, we took the 3% for the first read. So what we'll do, and I'll get with Chris on this because I'm not exactly sure how to do it, but we will ask for the additional 2%, and so that we can cut one check in the amount of 5% per employee. Does that make sense? And that's 2021. And then, because we have those funds set aside in a separate fund to do that with, and we'll take care of that all in one night so we can get back to them. And then next year, when we get those same funds, we'll do the same thing.
So we won't have to change anything in what we've got for 2022 budget, is that right? Okay.
Right, because when, I won't make the recommendation next year until we get those funds. We have been told we might get it sooner than 12 months. We just don't know when we're going to get it. But as soon as we get it, I'll bring it back before you all for that same recommendation.
There's no other further business. I would accept. Oh,
I just had one thing, Jamie.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, and I think Pam just addressed it, but just for clarity for everyone and myself on this, that only modification of the increase of 2% would be the only modification of the proposed 22 budget.
Actually, the ARPA funds and the stipend is not in the 22 budget. So we will amend the budget and put the ARPA funds in for 22 when we get those funds. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I would make a motion to adjourn the finance committee meeting.
Do I hear a second? Cody? Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of adjourning the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Would entertain a motion to adjourn the Board of Aldermen meeting.
So moved.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very, very, very much.
Yes, sir.